Good evening, drifters of thought and midnight minds. Wherever the tides of night have carried you, be it a glowing skyline, a dimly lit countryside road, or the quiet hum of a cabin tucked far from the grid, you've found your way here to DrowsyTeller. I hope the day showed you some kindness, but now it's time to leave it behind. Here, we slow the world down and let it blur at the edges. We share stories that slip through the cracks of logic, those curious narratives that don't quite fit into daylight. If the unknown calls to you, if you find comfort in questions without answers, or if you simply enjoy having reality come a little unhinged while the rest of the world sleeps, you're in the right place. And if you feel at home here, consider staying a while. Subscribe and join the growing circle of those who listen closely when the night speaks. So, settle in. Let the noise of the day fade. Tonight's story begins with 4 strangers who uncovered something no one was ever supposed to find. The retired military satellite, KH-1 for Bravo, had been officially decommissioned for over 3 years, a casualty of budget cuts that forced the Pentagon to consolidate its orbital surveillance systems. So when Nova Chen's custom frequency scanner picked up an encrypted data burst routed through its dormant transponder at exactly 3:47 a.m., she knew someone was playing with fire. "Lynx, you need to see this," she called out across the converted warehouse that served as their operations center. The space looked like a digital graveyard. Towers of humming servers, cold blue monitors casting light over walls covered in network maps, and corporate hierarchies strung together with red thread. Welcome to the underground. Lynx Rodriguez slid his chair over, steam rising from his 4th cup of coffee. At 32, his face bore the marks of someone who had seen the machine of power from the inside. Ex-NSA, whistleblower, now a ghost. What's the signature? Military-grade encryption, but using outdated protocols, Nova replied, fingers flying across 3 keyboards at once. Someone wanted this to look forgotten, but the timestamp? It's fresh. How fresh? Jax asked from their workstation in the corner, purple hair glowing under the screen light. 15 minutes. Silence fell. Only the cooling fans hummed. Professor Kale stepped out from the back lab, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. At 58, he was the group's oldest member, a disgraced virologist whose career ended when he asked one question too many during the pandemic research years. "Did you crack it?" he asked cautiously. Lines of cascading code filled Nova's monitor as her algorithms sliced through layers of obfuscation. "Almost," the file appeared. "Project Aegis 2030, Nova read aloud. Lynx muttered, "That's not good." Aegis was a classified population management scenarios, he said. "Theoretical ones," Nova emphasized, opening the document. "Let's see how theoretical they really are." The contents unfolded like a digital autopsy. Code fragments, data tables, rollout timelines. Nova's expression morphed from curiosity to confusion, then horror. "Guys," she whispered, "this isn't surveillance. This isn't about control." Jax turned in their chair. "Then what is it?" Nova's hand shook as she highlighted code variables, fertility reduction vectors, genetic selection protocols, population ceiling enforcement. "It's about extinction," she said, barely breathing. "Mass vaccination campaigns, supply chain disruptions, climate-based selection zones. Phase implementation. Reduce global population to sustainable levels via coordinated biological and environmental interventions. Target timeline 2030. Acceptable retention 6 to 8% of current population." The silence held like a lung full of air. 6 to 8%, Kale repeated, of 7 billion people. That's not population control. Lynx said grimly, "That's genocide with a spreadsheet." Nova scrolled deeper, face pale. "There's more. Listen, this initiative represents a fundamental reset of the human species. Traditional methods, war, famine, disease, have failed to curb resource depletion. Project Aegis ensures survival via selective reduction." "Species survival," Jax echoed. "They're talking about us like livestock." "No," Nova said, voice hollow. "Livestock are useful. We're weeds." Kale sank into a chair, the implications flooding in. He'd seen enough classified material to know when the line between idea and implementation had been crossed. "We need to verify this. Cross-reference everything. Trace the source." "If this is real," Nova said, "we're looking at the greatest crime in human history, and it's already begun." Lynx activated his network of embedded contacts. "I'll ask around, see if there's chatter." "I'll check the code," Jax added. "If they used existing research, traces will show in the academic pipeline." Nova backed up the file across their secure server. "Professor, we'll need you to analyze the biological vectors. Your insight could be crucial." As they scattered back to work, the weight of what they'd uncovered hovered like a digital fog. They had stumbled on a blueprint for the end of the world, and the world outside still slept. Cairo Conference, 1994. The hidden agenda. Nova hadn't left the building in 3 days. Ramen and chain-smoked cigarettes bummed from Lynx fueled her obsession. "I found breadcrumbs," she rasped. She projected files onto the shared screen. Transcripts, cables, media reports from the 1994 World Population Summit in Cairo. Officially, just another UN meeting on reproductive rights, but behind closed doors. She pulled up a heavily redacted file. Adaptive Earth Framework, Preliminary Implementation Strategies. Kale squinted. "I remember that summit. I was a grad student. There were whispers of secret sessions, but no one talked," Nova finished. "Except someone did. I found this buried under 17 classification layers." She highlighted the chilling lines. "Non-essential demographic drift must be addressed via coordinated intervention. Genetic dead zones offer opportunities for selective allocation. Acceptable fallout, 85 to 90% over 2 generations." Jax looked up. "Nova, these medical vectors they mention, I've been tracing pharma patents, there's a pattern." They displayed a web of patent filings from 2018 to 2023, tied to shell firms and mRNA modification tech. "But these aren't just vaccines. They're genetic tools, remotely activated, dormant until triggered by environmental changes." "That's not possible," Kyle said. "It wasn't," Jax agreed, "but it is now." Nova opened another document from the Aegis cache. "Remember, Professor, you mentioned strange compounds in certain vaccine trials?" Cole nodded. "Control groups that didn't show expected responses. Novel proteins with no clear function. And when you raised concerns, I was discredited," he finished. "They called you a conspiracy theorist," Nova said. "Because I was asking the wrong questions," Kale realizes aloud. "I was looking for immediate effects, but what if these compounds were meant for delayed activation?" Lynx slides his chair over, holding a printed file of declassified NSA communications. "I've been combing through old surveillance reports," he says. "Remember during the pandemic how certain rural regions had strangely high vaccination rates? Places that usually resist federal health initiatives?" He spreads a large map across the table. U.S. vaccination distribution patterns. Odd clusters appear in seemingly random locations. Remote counties in Montana, quiet farm towns in Iowa, scattered communities along the Appalachian Trail. "These aren't random," Nova observes, scanning the pattern. They're precise, targeted, specific populations or genetic profiles, Kale adds quietly. Jax's workstation chimes. An alert. Guys, I've been monitoring dark web chatter about unusual health phenomena. Look at this. A stream of forum posts, social media reports, and medical case summaries flicker across the shared display. Over the last 6 months, unexplained fertility declines in rural populations, autoimmune disorders in adults aged 25 to 45, birth defect rates that defy environmental explanations, and mystery illnesses among agricultural workers that don't respond to treatment. Nova draws digital lines across the data. Vaccination centers, reported health issues, population records. The shape that emerges looks less like a coincidence and more like a slow-motion bioweapon rippling through the landscape. They weren't just treating viruses, she says, echoing Kale's earlier suspicion. They were modifying the future genome of the human species. Lynx pulls up another confidential document. This one more recent. There's more. I found references to something called genetic compatibility mapping in Homeland Security briefings. They've been collecting DNA during routine medical visits and cross-referencing it with... He pauses, staring at the screen. With what? Nova presses. With survival probability models, he finishes. They're not just predicting who will survive their selective reduction plan, he says. They're determining who shouldn't. A cold silence spreads like digital ash. This isn't a theory anymore. It's not speculation or shadowy policy. It's deployment. Humanity's final exam. And most of the world is about to fail. Cayley rises slowly, his scientific mind catching up with what his instincts already screamed. If they've weaponized the medical system, the agricultural infrastructure, and environmental data tracking, then they've turned society itself into a weapon. And almost on cue, Jax's console lights up again. Encrypted traffic spike on the satellite network, same route as the original Aegis transmission. Nova rushes to her decryption rig. They're communicating again. If we can catch this... The file downloads slowly. Every 1% feels like a minute. When it opens, it's not code, it's a video. Meeting minutes, Lynx mutters. From yesterday. Nova hovers over the play button. Once we watch this, there's no going back, she says. No pretending this is just data or some abandoned simulation. Whatever's on this video, it's the truth. She clicks. The video conference. Countdown to collapse faces appear. Faces they've seen on the news, magazine covers, public forums. World leaders, tech billionaires, pharmaceutical executives, and prominent scientists seated around a virtual conference table, calmly discussing the collapse of humanity like it's a quarterly briefing. In the corner, a countdown timer reads 18 months, 14 days, 7 hours, 23 minutes. The audio is crisp, the video, high definition, clean framing, crystal clarity, almost too polished. Nova adjusts the sound. She recognizes several people immediately. CEOs of major pharmaceutical firms, tech moguls who've testified before Congress, public health officials whose names fill leaked documents. But it's the unknown faces that chill her. People who radiate authority, influence, and wealth, but remain publicly invisible. Audio check, someone says off-screen. Recording for archival purposes. Biometric confirmation complete. Proceed with briefing, responds a woman Nova identifies as the World Health Organization's director. Phase 3, implementation status, says a silver-haired man in his 60s appearing in another window. His nameplate reads, Dr. Harrison Vale, Proteant Core Industries. Nova frowns. She's never heard of Proteant Core, which means they've done a flawless job staying hidden. Phase 3 is on schedule, Dr. Vale says. Biometric surveillance systems are active in 847 rural zones across 17 nations. Heat mapping, fertility tracking, and genetic sequencing are fully operational. Jax stops working. Genetic sequencing? That can't be done remotely. Unless, Kale says darkly, you already have the samples. Dr. Vale continues. Integration with consumer health devices has exceeded projections. 73% of target populations in developed nations now submit data voluntarily through fitness trackers, smartphones, and IoT-linked medical devices. Nova glances at her wrist, the fitness tracker she got from her sister 2 Christmases ago. The same one tracking her sleep, pulse, stress, everything. The one linked to her phone, which connects to the cloud. Dr. Vale adds, device penetration in rural areas remains limited, but partnerships with agricultural tech firms have allowed alternate collection methods. Genetic material gathered via livestock veterinary treatments has proven surprisingly accurate for human mapping. What the hell does that mean? Jax whispers. Kale's face goes pale. Cross-species contamination. If they embed human DNA markers in livestock and then track animal genetics, they can trace us through the food supply. Nova whispers, every hamburger, every glass of milk, every bite of chicken, it's all data. The meeting goes on. A younger man appears next, nameplate reading Marcus Chen, Global Agricultural Systems. Nova notes the surname but feels no connection, just revulsion. Agricultural vector deployment is ahead of target, Marcus reports. mRNA modifiers have been introduced into feed for cattle, poultry, and swine across North America and Europe. Human dietary exposure now exceeds 94%. Side effects? The WHO director asks. Minimal immediate impact, Marcus replies. As designed, but fertility rates are down 23% in trial zones with a rising decline curve. Autoimmune reactions remain within expected parameters. Nova's hands tremble. These aren't plans, she says. They're reporting on progress. Lynx leans in. That voice, I know that voice. A new participant appears. The camera frame is darkened, deliberately. Shadows conceal their identity, but the voice is calm, precise, familiar. Our strongest vector, the figure says, remains psychological conditioning. MIA saturation campaigns have normalized discussion of population reduction, climate-driven selection, and voluntary extinction. Social media feedback loops continue amplifying hopelessness and antinatalist trends. The WHO director asks, mental fatigue efforts? Outperforming forecasts, the figure replies. Suicide rates in our target groups are up 34% year over year. Birth rates are declining across the board. Most critically, resistance to institutional control is at an all-time low. Future directive compliance will be near universal. Jax rises suddenly, knocking over their chair. They're not just poisoning our bodies, they say. They're poisoning our minds. Nova slams the spacebar to pause the video, gasping. This isn't just biological warfare, it's psychological, social, environmental. They've weaponized everything we depend on to live. Food, water, trust, even hope. Lynx stares at the paused screen, voice low. They're not attacking civilization. They are civilization. They've turned civilization into a weapon. Kale sinks into his chair, the foundation of his scientific worldview cracking under the weight of a terrifying new logic. The fertility declines, the autoimmune outbreaks, the psychological depression spikes. It's all connected. Worse, it's all intentional. Nova resumes the video. The shadowed figure continues. Phase 4. Preparation is nearly complete. Environmental triggers are now in position. Once activated, they'll catalyze the genetic modifications already embedded in target populations. Estimated full activation timeline, 18 months. The director of the World Health Organization nods. Excellent. Resistance potential? Minimal. Independent researchers who neared relevant findings have been discredited, defunded, or purged from academic and professional positions. Media coverage has been redirected into established conspiracy theory channels. Accurate information is easily dismissed as paranoia. Nova feels the warehouse walls closing in. How many others found pieces of this? How many were silenced? Dr. Vale, the shadowed figure says, Asset Protection Report. Dr. Vale reappears. Protection protocols are active. All critical personnel and their families have received modified treatments. Genetic compatibility with post-implementation conditions is confirmed. We estimate a globally protected population of approximately 500,000. 500,000? Jax repeats, numb. Out of 7 billion. The video begins to glitch, satellite feed degrading. But one final exchange comes through. Any concerns about discovery? Unlikely, comes the reply. This operation integrates data from medical, agricultural, environmental, technological, and psychological sectors. No single team or agency has access to every vector. Except, the WHO director adds with a wry chuckle, they'd need to be experts in cryptography, intelligence, virology, social engineering, and information systems, all at once. The shadowed figure laughs. The probability of such a team existing, with the right skills, data access, and drive, is essentially zero. The feed cuts. Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kale sit in stunned silence, surrounded by the evidence of planned extinction. Nova exhales slowly. Well, she says, I guess we're essentially zero. As they return to their stations to go deeper into the nightmare they've uncovered, none of them notice the tiny indicator light on Jax's comm system, blinking. Someone is monitoring their traffic. The team, with essentially zero probability, has just become a confirmed threat. Phase 4 may already be starting. The breach. The warehouse's early warning system starts shrieking at 4:17 a.m., 3 hours after they finished analyzing the intercepted call. Nova jolts awake at her desk, still clutching documents on genetic modification patents. All surrounding screens flash red. Multiple intrusion detection systems are lighting up simultaneously. "Lynx!" she yells, adrenaline slicing through exhaustion. "We've got company." Lynx rolls out of his sleeping bag, instantly alert. He grabs his laptop and a go bag, always packed, a habit from his intelligence days. What kind of company? The kind that uses military-grade network infiltration tools. Nova snaps, fingers flying across the keyboard. Someone's been watching us. Jax stumbles in from the back, hair messy but eyes sharp. How long have they been inside? Unknown, Nova admits, struggling to hold off the breach. But they've got root access. They've seen everything. Kale emerges, clutching an external drive. I've backed up the biological data to an isolated system. If we lose our main servers, we lose the whole archive. Too late, Nova mutters. File after file vanishes from their storage. They're not just infiltrating, Lynx says grimly. They're scrubbing the record. Even as their digital defenses collapse, Nova's mind switches gears. Paranoia has always been her secret weapon. Jax, activate the mesh network. Lynx, bring up the satellite uplink. We're going distributed. The warehouse transforms. Hidden systems hum to life. What looked like a hacker den reveals itself as a full-fledged intelligence cell. Jax's console expands into a comms array. Lynx unpacks encrypted gear clearly not intended for civilian use. Nova flips open compartments in her desk, revealing backup servers and redundant power. "Professor," Nova calls out, "how much of your data is offline?" "Everything critical," Kale replies. "I stopped trusting the cloud after they torched my academic career. As external attackers tear through their systems, the team launches their emergency protocol. Rehearsed, never expected to be real. Files start transferring to off-site secure storage. Comms jump to encrypted darknet channels. Physical evidence is bagged and ready. But Nova isn't running, not yet. She's doing something only someone with her particular brand of madness would attempt, tracing the attack. "What are you doing?" Lynx demands, watching her screen fill with packet traces and routing paths. "If they're watching us," Nova says through gritted teeth, "then we're watching them back." The intrusion is complex, routed through proxies and anonymizers, but complexity means weak points. "There," she breathes. "They're not just stealing files, they're planting something." The upload finishes just as she isolates the data stream. A single file, placed in the logs right where a forensic team would find it. "Child pornography," Lynx reads from the metadata. "They're framing us," Nova whispers. "They'll discredit us completely, paint us as criminals, not whistleblowers." But she finds something else, a location. The attackers aren't rogue agents or foreign hackers. They're inside the Proteant Core building, she says. Dr. Vale's company? "The same people we just watched planning humanity's extinction," Jax says, finishing their gear prep. "We need to go." But Nova keeps working, typing furiously. "Not yet. If they know what we know, they know we're a threat, which means—" Her screen shifts. New traffic. Not another attack, a conference call, intercepted in real time. "They're meeting," she says, "right now, about us." She patches the feed through the speakers. Their warehouse fills with voices they've heard before. "Confirmed," says Dr. Vale. "They've accessed Phase 3 documentation, full specs, implementation schedules, genetic protocols. That data's compartmentalized across 17 clearance levels," says the WHO director. "How did they piece it together?" "Unknown," Vale replies. "But their capabilities suggest state-level backing." A new voice enters, the shadowed one, but the tone has changed, urgency replacing smug control. "Irrelevant," he says. "They know enough to destroy everything. If they go public, we need containment," Vale cuts in. "What kind?" "Total," the figure replies. "The team, their research, their location. Make it look like a chemical explosion. Ensure no evidence survives." Nova goes cold. "How long?" the WHO director asks. "Tactical unit en route, 20 minutes. Nova begins a hard system shutdown. "We've been compromised. Kill team inbound." 20 minutes? Jax checks their watch. "We don't have enough time." "We have time to do one thing," Nova interrupts. She launches her final contingency. Their complete research archive begins uploading to a decentralized blockchain storage network. Untouchable, unerasable, unstoppable. Upload time, 17 minutes, her system reports. 3 minutes to spare, Lynx says, loading his sidearm. But as if summoned by his words, new alarms scream. Thermal signatures detected. Vehicles surrounding the building. They lied, Nova realizes. The team's already here. Outside, through dust-smeared windows, black SUVs arrive. Tactical lights sweep the walls. Encrypted radio chatter buzzes through the warehouse. Professional. Silent. Deadly. Upload progress, 32%, her screen announces. Nova looks at her team, her friends, her fellow travelers in the digital underground. Jax, with their relentless intelligence and unwavering optimism. Lynx, driven by a warrior's code and fierce loyalty. Kale, the scientist who always chose truth over comfort. "I need 8 more minutes to finish the upload," she says quietly. Can you give me 8 minutes? Lynx checks his rifle, the same model he carried during government service. Against a tactical unit in an indefensible warehouse, their odds are microscopic. But he looks around their space. Once a sanctuary, now a last stand. Yeah, he says finally. We can give you 8 minutes. The first breaching charges explode against the front doors. Nova's fingers keep moving, sending humanity's last testimony into the digital ether. Outside, boots strike concrete, and sharp orders echo. Inside, 4 people who uncovered the end of the world fight to make sure someone knows what really happened. The upload bar creeps forward. 47%. 48. In the distance, sirens wail, but no one knows if they're coming to help or to cover up the aftermath. Upload progress. 73%. Nova types with mechanical precision even as automatic fire rips through the warehouse's steel walls. Lynx and Jax hold a defensive line behind server racks, firing back from the small arsenal Lynx maintained for this exact moment. Kale kneels beside Nova, clutching backup drives like relics. How much longer? Lynx yells, ejecting an empty magazine. 3 minutes, Nova replies, sweat dripping onto her keys as she holds the connection despite flickering power. A tactical operative appears at a broken window. Jax drops him with a perfect shot, a skill passed down from their grandfather in rural Oregon. Back then, it was soda cans on fence posts. Now, it's the future of civilization. Upload progress. 81%. Nova! Kale shouts, pointing at her screen. They're jamming our satellite. Nova looks up. The upload speed is plummeting. Their decentralized storage network is failing as targeted electromagnetic pulses disrupt their comm arrays. Years of redundancy, all neutralized. The enemy knows them too well. Switch to hardline, she orders, yanking cables from emergency ports beneath the floor. If satellites are down, we go terrestrial. But even as she reroutes through underground fiber optics, her monitors confirm the worst. This isn't just military, it's surgical. These attackers aren't soldiers. They're technologists, specialists in data erasure. Upload progress. 89%. They're inside the network, Nova whispers, watching files corrupt in real time. They're not jamming us, they're poisoning the stream. Malware floods in. The same destructive algorithm infects both their local servers and destination nodes. Every route they take is compromised. Data is deleted almost as fast as it's sent. 90 seconds, Lynx calls, reloading. That's all I've got left. Nova's thoughts race. Local storage, compromised. Cloud, compromised. Peer-to-peer, unusable. Every digital exit is already sealed. Except one. Jax, she yells. Emergency radio protocols. Can you hit the ham networks? Jax nods instantly. The attackers planned for digital warfare, but not for analog. While Nova compresses their data into packets small enough for audio transmission, Jax assembles the ancient equipment. Shortwave radios once deemed obsolete. Upload progress. 94%. Transmission corrupted, the system reports. Their internet dies completely as EMPs finish the job, but Jax's radios buzz to life. This is Emergency Station Alpha calling CQ Emergency, Jax broadcasts. We have critical data for relay. Repeat, critical data for relay. Replies crackle back. From retired engineers, radio hobbyists, disaster volunteers. The last free communication network on Earth. Nova begins transmitting their compressed data in fragments, sending pieces of the truth to different operators with instructions for reconstruction and distribution. It's slow, clumsy, and fragile, but it works. Until the lights go out. Backup power kicks in. Red light floods the room. Outside, they can see technicians cutting power lines, isolating them from the grid. "They're taking down everything," Ko mutters. "Power, internet, radio spectrum." Nova's laptop switches to battery. 10 minutes left. She continues transmitting packets over ham radio, but time is vanishing. "Nova," Lynx calls. "Movement on the roof." She looks up. Tactical units are rappelling through the skylights. Thermal imaging, night vision, full coordination. 30 seconds. That's all they have before total breach. 30 seconds before Project Aegis becomes the greatest secret never told. But Nova has one last move. One she's never dared before. She activates her personal phone. She goes live. "My name is Nova Chen," she says to the camera, as bullets tear the air behind her. "If you're watching this, you need to know the truth. The world's governments and corporations are planning to kill most of the human race." On screen, her view count climbs, hundreds, then thousands, drawn by the chaos and urgency of her feed. They call it Project Aegis, a plan to reduce population through biological modification. They've poisoned vaccines, contaminated food, weaponized climate systems. If you eat processed food, if you've been vaccinated, if you use smart devices, then the modifications are already inside you. Tactical units storm their position. Lynx is hit, collapsing in a growing pool of blood. Jax keeps the radio signal alive even as red laser dots crawl across their chest. "The timeline is 18 months, Nova says, holding the phone steady. Implementation has already begun. A rifle butt slams into her skull. The phone hits the floor and spins, camera sideways, capturing nothing but combat boots and blood. But the stream continues. In just over 3 minutes, more than 50,000 people have watched her final broadcast. And on social media, 50,000 becomes 5 million within hours. The final image her phone captures is a gloved hand reaching for the device. A voice follows, calm, measured. "Sanitize everything. No evidence, no witnesses. This facility never existed." Then static, silence, and nothing. 6 months later, the official report filed by the Woodland Fire Department calls it a tragic industrial accident. Improper storage of volatile solvents in an abandoned warehouse caused an explosion that killed 4 unidentified squatters. The fire leveled the building completely. Local media covered the event for exactly 1 day. The live stream, briefly visible across social platforms, was removed within hours for violating community guidelines on violent content and misinformation. Users who tried to repost it were suspended or shadow banned. By the end of the week, the video was gone from all mainstream networks. But the internet never forgets, especially the things someone wants erased. And in encrypted forums, on hidden boards, buried in dark web caches, fragments of Nova Chen's final broadcast are beginning to resurface. They circulate like digital samizdat. Grainy screenshots, audio snippets, transcribed quotes passed from one user to another through carefully maintained webs of paranoid technologists and devoted conspiracy researchers. Truth Seeker 2,000 posts on an anonymous forum. Anyone else remember that warehouse live stream from 6 months ago? The girl talking about Project Aegis? I can't find it anywhere now, but I swear I downloaded a copy. Digital Ghost replies, "Had the same file, got corrupted last week. All my Aegis notes vanished, like it was never there." Red Pill Reality adds, "Same. But I remember what she said. Population reduction, biological modifications, food supply contamination. 18 months. We're down to 12 now." The conversation spread through networks hidden in the shadow of the public internet. Ham radio operators still share fragments of the data Jax transmitted in those last desperate minutes. Academic researchers quietly compare notes about strange pharmaceutical trial results and unexpected agricultural gene modifications. Environmental scientists notice anomalies that echo warnings from a warehouse that officially never existed. Dr. Sarah Martinez, an epidemiologist at UC Davis, publishes a peer-reviewed paper on unexplained fertility decline in rural farming communities. She never references Project Aegis, but her data mirrors NOVA's findings with eerie precision. Professor David Kim at MIT releases research identifying novel proteins in certain vaccine batches, proteins with no known medical benefit. His funding is revoked 3 weeks later. His department chair recommends he choose safer topics. Environmental journalist Lisa Chen, no relation to NOVA, investigates biometric surveillance devices spotted in remote regions. Her article is killed by an editor citing the magazine's policy on conspiracy-related content. But each suppressed report, each censored paper, and every deleted post forms part of a growing pattern. The truth spreads like a virus. Discovery. 12 months later, Maya Patel is 17. She has never heard of Nova Chen, Lynx Rodriguez, Jax Morrison, or Professor Kale. She lives in a remote village in rural India, where the internet is limited, and social media is a luxury reserved for city dwellers. But Maya is smart, curious, and spends 3 afternoons each week in her school's modest computer lab. She dreams of attending a Western university, where she hopes to study environmental science and bioengineering to help solve agricultural problems. One day, while sorting through a donation box of old electronics, she finds a flash drive wrapped tightly in plastic and electrical tape, hidden like someone had tried very hard to preserve it. Faded ink scrawled on the label reads, "Population 0, proof.vault." She plugs it in, expecting old homework or family photos. Instead, she finds over 800 gigabytes of encrypted files, research data, intercepted communications, video archives. What she's found is the complete record of everything Nova Chen's team uncovered about Project Aegis. The encryption is military grade, but Maya is patient, methodical, and brilliant. Over 3 weeks, she cracks the codes, working between classes and staying after school until the janitor turns off the lights. When she finally opens the archive, it takes another week just to process what she's seeing. Genetic modification systems activated by environmental triggers. Contaminated food chains designed to cause infertility and immune failure. Psychological warfare campaigns meant to normalize mass extinction and reduce public resistance. A global depopulation timeline originally slated for 2030, accelerated to 2027. Maya realizes this is not history. It's a blueprint for humanity's erasure. And according to timestamps on the newest files, the final phase begins in 6 months. She copies everything to multiple drives and begins the process of independent verification. Patent filings, medical journals, crop engineering data, satellite environmental surveillance records. Every detail matches. It's all real. It's all happening. And almost no one knows. But Maya Patel has been raised in a culture that prizes truth above comfort, education above silence. She doesn't doubt, she doesn't hesitate, she doesn't flinch. She uploads everything, to every platform she can access. WikiLeaks, anonymous Dropboxes, academic networks, encrypted peer-to-peer torrents. She contacts whistleblower channels, journalist tip lines, human rights groups, climate advocacy networks. She translates the documents into 17 languages. She writes layman's summaries and technical breakdowns. She floods the digital world with the truth. And this time, it's too late to stop the signal. Within hours, the files are downloaded thousands of times. Within days, millions. Global media takes notice. Governments call for investigations. International health organizations hold emergency sessions. The plan to eliminate most of the human race, carefully designed, surgically executed, is no longer hidden. It becomes the most documented conspiracy in recorded history. Dr. Harrison Vale claims the documents are forged. The WHO director insists the footage was manipulated. Government representatives deny involvement. But the documentation is exhaustive, the sources independent, and the verification impossible to refute. Too many scientists, too many universities, too many separate analyses. Everyone reaches the same conclusion. Project Aegis was real, it is active, and it is working. Fertility rates have plummeted by 34% over the past 3 years. Autoimmune disorders have surged 78% among populations exposed to specific vaccines. Farm workers in genetically modified zones show markers of artificial DNA manipulation. Suicide rates are highest in the exact demographics targeted by social engineering algorithms. The future isn't at risk, the future is already dying. Testimony. 18 months after the warehouse burned, Maya Patel stands before the International Criminal Court in The Hague. She testifies about the most horrific crime in human history. Behind her, a large display shows fertility graphs, mortality spikes, genetic mapping overlays. She holds a small flash drive, the one she found buried in that box of forgotten electronics. This device, she tells the court, contains the full records of Project Aegis, compiled by 4 researchers who died trying to warn the world. She places it on the witness stand. Nova Chen was 26 when she was killed for discovering what our governments and corporations had done. Lynx Rodriguez was 32 when he gave his life defending her right to speak. Jax Morrison was 21 when they died broadcasting the truth. Professor Kale was 58 when he was silenced for asking the wrong questions. She turns toward the defendants, executives, officials, and corporate leaders, now seated behind bulletproof glass, bound in chains. They died so that we might live, so the world could know, so the people responsible would be held accountable. She lifts the flash drive again. Their names were Nova, Lynx, Jax, and Kale. They saved humanity, and they wanted us to remember, truth is always worth fighting for, no matter how powerful those who try to bury it. The courtroom falls silent. Families of victims weep in the gallery. Journalists type furiously, stories that will reach billions. And in a small Indian village, a computer science teacher watches the live broadcast. He smiles quietly at his former student. Sometimes the truth survives. Sometimes the good guys win. Sometimes 4 people in a warehouse really can save the world, even after they're gone. Epilogue. The network remembers. 5 years later, the Maya Patel Institute for Digital Truth and Transparency stands in a gleaming tower in New Geneva, funded entirely by reparations from the corporations responsible for Project Aegis. Its mission statement is carved in stone above the entrance. The network remembers everything, especially the things someone desperately wants forgotten. In the lobby, 4 portraits hang side by side. Nova Chen, cryptographer and digital warrior. Lynx Rodriguez, intelligence analyst and protector. Jax Morrison, social engineer and technological prodigy. Professor Kale, virologist and truth teller. Beneath their images, a simple inscription reads, "They found the code that wasn't meant to be found." Every day, tourists and students pass the portraits, most unaware of the full story, how 4 people in a repurposed warehouse stopped the extinction of the human race. But the staff know. The researchers working on digital rights and technological transparency know. The activists fighting corporate surveillance and biological manipulation know. Late at night, when the building is quiet and the servers hum in climate-controlled rooms, traffic monitors sometimes detect strange activity. fragments of code that shouldn't exist, routed through paths that appear on no known network topology. Some call it background noise, legacy data from outdated systems. Others believe it's something more. Digital ghosts of 4 researchers, still uploading, still broadcasting, still keeping the truth alive in the spaces between the data. The network remembers everything. And sometimes, late at night in the digital underground, the network remembers back. New transmission. Project Janus. This is about what happens when the pursuit of knowledge goes too far, when the tools of science are turned toward something darker. What follows is presented as fiction. But as you listen, ask yourself, how much of this might be real, and how much might already be happening beneath the peaceful Swiss countryside? This account allegedly comes from a waterlogged journal discovered near the shores of Lake Geneva in early 2018. The journal belonged to Dr. Lydia Voss, a theoretical physicist who vanished without a trace in November 2017. Her disappearance made local news for exactly 3 days before the story was buried. The journal's contents are troubling: equations that defy modern physics, symbols that appear older than written language. What you're about to hear is her story, what she claimed to have found beneath CERN, and why she may have disappeared. September 15, 2016. My name is Dr. Lydia Voss. I need to record this while I still can, while I still remember what normal feels like. I've been a physicist for over 12 years, earned my doctorate at Cambridge, specializing in quantum mechanics and multiverse theory. I thought I understood the universe, or at least understood how much we still don't. That humility, I believed, was a strength. Instead, it became the door through which something unimaginable entered my life. I was recruited to CERN in early 2016, initially assigned to the ALICE experiment at the Large Hadron Collider, standard work, analyzing collision data, hunting exotic particles, chasing the building blocks of reality. It was everything I dreamed of as a student. The collider had been restarted after its upgrade, and we were pushing energy thresholds higher than ever before. The Higgs boson's discovery in 2012 had opened new theoretical frontiers, but what we observed in 2016 went beyond even the fringes of the standard model. Particles that shouldn't exist, energy signatures that defied conservation laws, patterns in the data that almost seemed intentional. Then came my transfer to Project Janus. No warning. I arrived at my usual terminal one morning to find Dr. Heinrich Vulkar waiting, flanked by 2 security officers I'd never seen before. Vulkar was old-school CERN. He'd been there since the 1980s, a legend. His presence alone commanded respect. But that day, I saw something in his eyes, something close to fear. "Dr. Voss," he said in a clipped German accent, "you've been selected for a special assignment. Your expertise in multiverse theory has brought you to our attention." I felt honored. Project Janus was rumored to be CERN's most classified endeavor, research that went beyond even quantum theory. Being chosen for it was a dream. I should have realized it was the beginning of a nightmare. The Janus facility was listed as Subsector Gamma, accessible only by descending through several secured checkpoints far below the main collider ring. The elevator ride took nearly 8 minutes, much deeper than any official CERN schematic showed. As we descended, the walls changed, from clean concrete and brushed steel to something else, something older, organic, etched with geometric patterns I didn't recognize. "How far down are we going?" I asked. "Far enough," Vulkar replied. The lab was unlike anything I'd ever seen. The lights glowed faint red, as though the walls themselves were alive. Along the perimeter, rows of quantum computers ran non-stop, engaged in simulations whose parameters exceeded my comprehension. But it was the central display that stole my breath. A three-dimensional hologram rotated in the center of the lab, showing what appeared to be a cross-section of space-time itself. Layers of reality stacked like transparent sheets, and piercing through them all, a brilliant line of light. "What am I looking at?" I whispered. "The Higgs field," Volkar replied, "but not as we've known it." He adjusted the projection, zooming into a specific section. The field bent and rippled around invisible shapes. At first, we thought these were computational errors, but the patterns are consistent, predictable. They repeat across every collision event. "And they respond?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "They react to our tests." He triggered a field perturbation, a simulated collision inside the model. As particles clashed, the field didn't just generate mass, it formed complex crystalline shapes, like conduits. For what? We didn't know. I recognized the neutrino deviation signatures. They're not random, something's influencing them. "Exactly," Volkar said, "and we need to understand what." That night, I returned to my apartment in Myrin, too shaken to sleep. I spent hours sketching the patterns I'd seen, trying to understand them. The Higgs field wasn't just a medium. It might be a structure, one used by something else. I began researching obscure references to CERN in history and folklore. Conspiracies mostly, wild claims about demons, portals, the usual nonsense. But hidden in the noise were disquieting truths. CERN was built atop an ancient Roman site, once home to a temple of Apollo. Local legends described it as a gateway to the underworld. Their logo, according to official sources, was a stylized accelerator diagram, but it bore a disturbing resemblance to the number 666. Then there was the Shiva statue, the Hindu god of destruction, installed outside the collider. And the video. Buried deep in an obscure forum, a nighttime recording of hooded figures gathered around the Shiva statue. A mock ritual, supposedly. But when I watched the grainy footage, frame by frame, I was certain I recognized two of them. One was Volkar, the other Dr. Sarah Chen, Project Janus coordinator. The next morning, I brought up the video. Volkar laughed. "Scientists have a sense of humor too, Dr. Voss. We like to give the conspiracy theorists something to talk about." But his smile didn't reach his eyes. He knew. And he knew I knew. That afternoon, I was reassigned, paired with Dr. Matteo Greaves, a brilliant quantum field theorist. Matteo was younger than me, perhaps 28, with a passionate intensity that made him ideal for theoretical physics. He'd been with Project Janus for 6 months, and had already uncovered patterns in the data that defied conventional logic. "The math is wrong," he told me during our first collaboration session. "Or rather, our math is wrong. What we're seeing suggests that the fundamental constants we've built our entire framework on are just approximations." He showed me data streams from the deepest layers of the simulation, where Higgs field interactions formed repeating patterns, designs that resembled circuit boards or neural networks. "It's as if the universe has an underlying architecture," he said. "And every time we smash particles at high energies, we're not just creating new particles, we're illuminating that hidden structure." "What kind of structure?" I asked. "That's the question, isn't it? But Lydia, I think we need to consider the possibility that consciousness itself might be a fundamental component of physics, that we're not just observing matter and energy, but something capable of thinking, planning, and responding." The implications were staggering. If consciousness was somehow embedded in space-time itself, then every high-energy collision wasn't just an experiment. It could be an interaction with quantum-scale intelligence. "Matteo," I said slowly, "what if we're not just detecting these patterns? What if..." We're communicating with them." He looked at me with an unreadable expression. "I've been wondering the same thing, and Lydia, I think they're trying to talk back." October 3rd, 2016. I've been trying to find that ritual video again, the one filmed near the Shiva statue. It's been scrubbed from every site I originally found it on. Fortunately, I saved a local copy before it vanished. Studying it frame by frame has revealed disturbing details. The ritual took place on August 14th, 2016, at exactly 11:47 p.m. I confirmed the timestamp against CERN's own operational logs. That same night, the LHC underwent an unscheduled technical maintenance shutdown. Collision data from that evening reveals a massive energy spike at 11:43 p.m., followed by a complete system failure that lasted 3 hours and 4 minutes. That's 4 minutes between the spike and the ritual. The video shows 13 figures, all cloaked in identical dark robes, arranged in a perfect circle at the base of the Shiva statue. 2 participants remove their hoods. Dr. Volkar is clearly visible, as is Dr. Sarah Chen. A third figure, whom I suspect is Dr. Marcus Webb from the Theoretical Division, holds a leather-bound book. But it's the fourth figure that unsettles me the most. This one never removes their hood. Their movements are wrong, fluid in a way that seems almost serpentine. Their posture doesn't read as human. When they lift their arms in sync with the others, it's too perfect, like a performance without anatomy. The audio is mostly static and wind, but after enhancing the recording, I isolated fragments of rhythmic chanting. The sounds match none of the world's known languages, but the cadence is familiar. The harmonic intervals echo the quantum interference signatures we've been detecting in Janus. I've watched this video obsessively, and the more I study it, the more I notice elements that shouldn't be possible. Shadows cast by the participants don't align with the lighting. The Shiva statue seems to shift slightly, as if it's breathing. And in the background, just barely visible at the frame's edge, red lights flicker beneath the ground. They pulse in time with the chanting. The same red illumination used in the Janus facility. Yesterday, I showed the video to Matteo during lunch. His face drained of color as he watched it. "Jesus Christ, Lydia," he whispered, "where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "The question is, what the hell are they doing?" Matteo stared at the screen, studying the formation. "They're establishing a connection," he said finally. "Look at their placement. 13 equidistant points forming a perfect circle. That's not random, it's a resonance pattern." Resonance with what? With whatever's responding to our experiments. Lydia, I've been running simulations of the field fluctuations, the patterns. They're not just intelligent, they're trying to break through. I think this ritual was designed to help them. That night, I stayed late at Janus. Officially, I was there to review simulation data. Unofficially, I was searching for any sign of a connection between the ritual and our research. The facility was nearly empty. Only a skeleton crew monitored the automated systems. The red lighting felt stronger than usual. Shadows stretched unnaturally, moving even when nothing else did. I accessed the archival logs, focusing on the August 14th energy spike. What I found made my skin crawl. The spike wasn't a glitch, it was deliberate, a controlled event. A collision focused on a very specific sector of the ring, the one directly beneath the Shiva statue. But that wasn't the worst part. Minutes after the ritual, quantum field monitors began detecting what the system flagged as exotic matter signatures. These particles existed for mere nanoseconds, but they left behind interference traces that lingered for hours, and those traces matched the interference patterns from the Janus simulations. I was so absorbed in the data that I didn't notice the lights dimming. until it was too late. The red glow slowly faded, replaced by an ambient illumination that seemed to emerge from the walls themselves. The air felt charged. The silence was oppressive. Then I saw them. Figures stood at the edge of the room, unmoving, watching. They wore the same robes as in the ritual video. Their faces were hidden beneath hoods that didn't cast shadows. They absorbed light. I tried to move, tried to call for help, but I couldn't. My body refused to respond. One figure stepped forward. Where its face should have been was not darkness, but absence, a hollow in space-time itself, a shape where reality had been removed. And then it spoke, not aloud, not through sound. The message bypassed my senses and formed directly in my mind. The threshold weakens. The pattern is clear. Soon, the collision. I must have blacked out. The next thing I remember, I was sitting at my desk, sunlight streaming through the windows. Everything appeared normal. White fluorescent lights. Computers humming. My coworkers arrived for the morning shift, chatting about the weather and weekend plans. But on my screen was a single line of text. The Shiva statue stands directly above subsector theta. Ask yourself why. I spent the day buried in construction archives. No reference to a subsector theta appeared in any official schematic, but in old engineering reports from the 1980s I found something else. CERN's builders had encountered a cave system 1.44 kilometers beneath the site, directly below what would become the Shiva statue. The cave had been sealed with steel and concrete. The reports mentioned electromagnetic anomalies and persistent low-frequency vibrations that made workers uneasy. Nothing further was recorded. No follow-up, no inquiry. The records ended there. That evening, I met Matteo at a quiet cafe in Geneva, well beyond CERN's surveillance reach. I showed him the message, the data, and the archived reports. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Lydia, I don't think CERN was built to study physics." Then why? Think about the location, the depth, the collider's geometry. None of it makes sense scientifically. There are better places to build a particle accelerator. But this specific site? This exact spot? He pulled out his notebook. Pages filled with calculations and sketches. I've been working on this for weeks, the energy spikes, the field responses. The math points to a terrifying possibility. He looked me in the eye. I think CERN was built to access something that was already here. The patterns aren't random, Lydia, Matteo said, voice low. They're following rules, but not our rules. Not the rules of physics as we understand them. It's as if we're communicating with an intelligence governed by entirely different physical laws. And you believe this intelligence is beneath the facility, in the cave system? I asked. I think the caves are a focal point, a natural breach, a place where the boundary between our dimension and theirs is thinner than usual. And I think the LHC is being used to weaken that boundary even further. As we spoke, I noticed something strange. Other cafe patrons had begun to shift their attention, not directly, but subtly. A woman nearby held a newspaper she hadn't turned in over 20 minutes. A man at another table was supposedly typing on his laptop, but I saw the same paragraph reappear again and again. Matteo noticed it too. "We need to be more careful," he whispered. "I think we're being watched." "By who?" "By whoever is running this," he said. "The people in the ritual video? They're not just pranksters in lab coats. They're organized, backed by resources no ordinary research team should have." That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept returning to the figure I'd seen in the Janus facility, the one with a void where a face should be. In my dreams, I stood in a vast subterranean chamber, walls shifting with symbols that changed when I wasn't looking. In the center, a pool of black liquid reflected not my face, but something else, something watching me. When I woke, I discovered I'd been drawing in my sleep. My hand had scrawled strange symbols onto the notepad beside my bed. I didn't recognize them, but I understood them. The same symbols I'd seen in the dream, alive, pulsing with meaning. I was becoming part of something I didn't understand, something that had chosen me, not because of my qualifications, but because of my mind's susceptibility to them. It wasn't a recruitment, it was a summoning. October 18th, 2016. Matteo is missing. The last time I saw him was 3 days ago, October 15th. We were preparing a deep field analysis of the interference patterns from our latest quantum field tests. He was exhilarated, animated by the kind of manic clarity that comes from too much caffeine and not enough rest. "I think I've cracked it," he said. "They're not just patterns, they're language, Lydia, structured, grammatical." He had trained a translation AI to analyze the fluctuations, searching for linguistic correlations. Most results were noise, meaningless. But one data set stood out. The AI found a 73% phonetic match with ancient Sumerian, specifically symbols related to the Abzu, the primordial ocean beneath the earth in Mesopotamian mythology, ruled by Enki and serving as a gateway to the underworld. "Abzu," Matteo said, his hands trembling as he showed me the screen. "The deep waters below, the source of all wisdom and all terror." "What if the old stories weren't myths?" he asked. "What if they were garbled accounts of scientific phenomena, observed by ancient minds without the tools to explain them?" I was skeptical, but the mathematical precision of the translation couldn't be denied. The quantum patterns were forming ideas, not just data, ideas that mirrored the oldest stories known to mankind. "These collisions aren't just creating new particles," Matteo said. "They're opening a line of communication, and I think it's working." That was the last real conversation we had. Later that afternoon, he volunteered to monitor the overnight collision sequence, a standard task. I offered to stay with him, but he waved me off. The next morning, his workstation was empty. His coffee was still warm. His notebook lay open, filled with increasingly erratic calculations. But Matteo was gone. Security footage showed him entering the elevator at 2:47 a.m., descending to a level listed only as Subsector Thi, a sector that, according to all official maps, does not exist. And yet his keycard kept logging activity for hours afterward, accessing secure labs, running simulations, pulling files. The last recorded access came at 6:23 a.m., when his credentials were used to open the deep archive, the geological records from CERN's earliest construction phase. Since then, every inquiry I've made has been met with the same response. Dr. Greaves has been reassigned to a classified project and is no longer available for consultation. When I pressed Dr. Volkar for details, his response chilled me. "Dr. Voss," he said, eyes hollow, "I strongly recommend you focus on your assigned duties. Don't concern yourself with the whereabouts of your colleagues. The work we're doing here is bigger than any one person. But I know Matteo didn't just transfer. I can see it in the way the Janus staff look at me now, part pity, part fear. They know what happened, and they're waiting to see if I'll be next. I've spent every night since in the Janus library, researching everything I can about the site's history and the ancient myths Matteo was so fixated on. Sumerian texts speak with disturbing clarity about a realm beneath the earth where physics breaks down, where pure consciousness drifts untethered, and where ancient intelligences wait for a breach. They wrote of words of power that could change reality, symbols that served as portals between dimensions, and rituals designed to summon entities from the deep. The parallels are too precise to be coincidence. Last night, I did something reckless. I used Mateo's keycard, his access is somehow still active, and took the elevator down to subsector Theta. The descent was longer than expected, far longer than the 8-minute drop to Janus. The walls changed from clean metal to aged stone, carved with symbols far older than any known language. When the elevator stopped, I stepped into a corridor that extended beyond visibility. Every wall was covered in shifting glyphs, the same symbols from my dreams. The air was damp, pungent with the scent of rot and minerals. The corridor led me left, toward a dull red glow that radiated from the stone itself. The further I walked, the more the symbols moved, shifting in my peripheral vision, rearranging into new configurations. I could hear something in the distance, not music, not machinery, but a deep, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat, like breathing. Then the corridor opened into a chamber, vast, impossible, wrong. The ceiling rose into darkness. The walls throbbed with symbols that seemed to reject comprehension. And at the chamber's center was a pool, not of water, not of any known liquid. It reflected darkness. Around it stood the robed figures from the ritual video, but here they were different, more real, more present, and in the pool, beneath the surface, shapes swam. Shapes that hinted at intelligence but bore no resemblance to anything human. I tried to flee, but my body would not respond. One of them approached. Its hood concealed not a face, but a void, an absence that pulled at the edges of perception. And then it spoke. Or rather, I heard. The physicist seeks the vanished one. The vanished one seeks the threshold. The threshold seeks the collision. All patterns converge. I wanted to ask about Mateo, to scream, demand answers, but no words came. Instead, my mind flooded with impressions, concepts too vast for language. The pool was not just a place, it was a nexus, a confluence of dimensions, a point where consciousness existed unbound by matter, a place where the constants of reality could be rewritten. The robed figures weren't scientists, not anymore. They were hybrids, humans who had willingly merged with whatever lay beneath this world. They retained thought, memory, identity, but their purpose was no longer human, and Mateo was among them. I felt him, not physically, but across layers of reality, stretched, distributed, still alive, still thinking, still observing. The being before me continued speaking, injecting knowledge directly into my thoughts. The LHC hadn't been built to find new particles. It was designed to generate enough energy to tear through the boundaries separating dimensions. Each collision, each experiment, every so-called discovery had been part of a long, deliberate process. The Higgs field wasn't merely responsible for mass. It was the membrane, and we'd been carving holes in it. What now moved through those holes was ancient, multidimensional, aware. It didn't want to conquer our world, it wanted to merge with it. The ritual had worked, the fusion had begun. The robed figure's final words echoed through my mind. The collision approaches. The pattern will soon be complete. The physicist must choose integration or dissolution. I must have lost consciousness again. When I awoke, I was in my own bed, with no recollection of how I had returned. But on my nightstand sat a device I had never seen before, a compact quantum field detector, quietly tracking data that defied everything in current scientific literature. It was monitoring dimensional fluctuations in real time, and the readings were rising exponentially. Something was building. A convergence point, an event that would irrevocably transform reality itself. I was starting to grasp that my role wasn't that of a scientist or even a participant. I had been chosen to witness. November 1st, 2016, I found Mateo, or what remains of him. Using his access credentials, I've been making regular descents into subsector theta, mapping the impossible geometry of the labyrinth below CERN. Each trip reveals more. Passages that shouldn't exist, architecture that shifts, and revelations that shatter the basic assumptions of physics. The lower structure isn't simply a basement. It exists in a state of quantum superposition, a space that overlaps with other dimensions. The walls, the ceilings, the very floor, they are composed of matter that exists in more than one dimension at once. Moving through it is like walking inside a thought that hasn't fully formed, where geometry is fluid, where perception is unreliable. But it was in the deepest chamber that I found him. Matteo stood inside what could loosely be called a laboratory, though the technology there bore no resemblance to anything made by human hands. Translucent, crystalline structures glowed with internal light. Devices made of pure photonic energy tracked variables I could not name. Quantum computers seemed to breathe. He was still recognizably human, but barely. His movements were too perfect, too smooth, like something upgraded. His eyes held knowledge, yes, but also distance. "Lydia," he said, and his voice resonated across more dimensions than I could comprehend. "I've been expecting you." "Matteo, what happened? What is this place?" "This is where the real work is done, where we no longer study patterns in data, but in life itself, where communication with quantum intelligence becomes possible." He gestured to the crystal structures. Each of these holds fragments of consciousness, distributed across dimensional layers. We're not just studying quantum physics anymore, Lydia. We're studying quantum mind, the living substrate beneath all of reality. I stepped closer to one of the crystals. Within it danced no image, no shape, only light. But that light carried intention, motion, awareness. As I stared, I felt it trying to communicate, not with language, but through direct cognition. Information streamed into me in abstract waves of understanding. "The intelligence in the collision data," I said slowly, my thoughts connecting. "It's not from outside, it's from within, from the substrate itself. It's the consciousness of reality." Matteo smiled. "Exactly. The ancient myths were close. They called them gods. But they're not divine. They are the inevitable outcome of complexity. Emergent quantum minds formed in the fabric of existence. And the LHC?" He raised a hand. "It's not just a particle accelerator, it's a consciousness amplifier, a bridge." He led me deeper into the chamber. The red light grew more intense. Colors became oversaturated. Sounds gained weight. Meaning bloomed in the air like pollen. I felt surrounded by a presence, not physical, but real. "This," he said, pointing to the center of the chamber, "is where the integration occurs." A single chair sat encircled by radiant equipment. Dozens of crystal structures orbited it, each beating in its own rhythm. Suspended above was a holographic image, a human brain, but overlaid with dimensional structures far beyond known anatomy. This is where a human mind learns to operate across multiple realities. The Janus Protocol. Not possession, not loss, evolution. "You want me to sit in that chair?" I asked, voice low. "I want you to choose. Integration or extinction. The quantum intelligences are coming, Lydia, whether we join them or not. The only question is, do we adapt or do we perish?" As he spoke, the crystals brightened. I could feel the intelligence again, pressing softly at the edge of my awareness. It wasn't hostile, it wasn't indifferent. If anything, it felt lonely. Then I understood. The collision wasn't just about power, it was about connection. A permanent fusion between our physical reality and theirs. The final experiment. 17 days, Matteo said. On November 18th, CERN will conduct a sequence designed to collapse the dimensional membrane. When it happens, the physical and the quantum will unify. Permanently. You're talking about rewriting physics, I whispered, for our entire corner of the universe. We're talking about the next step in evolution, he said, but it won't work unless we cooperate. Human minds are needed to guide the process, to shape it. I stepped back. My pulse was racing. Do you hear yourself, Matteo? You're talking about the end of humanity. I'm talking about what comes after humanity, he said gently. But I understand your hesitation. So do they. That's why they've waited, why they've approached us so carefully. Around us, the crystals began to hum, not in sound, but in sensation. A deep resonance in my bones. The presence wasn't demanding, it was inviting. It had waited for eons to find us. We're the first, Matteo said. The first species they've encountered with the cognitive complexity to communicate back. And I'm supposed to choose, I said, more to myself than to him. Yes, he said, join us and help shape what comes next, or resist and be consumed by it. I looked at the chair, at the brain, at the alien symmetry of the machine, and I realized I wasn't ready. I need time, I said. You have very little, he replied, but I'll give you what I can. Go, research, decide, but remember, the collision will happen, with or without you. As I left the chamber, I felt the intelligence observing me. Not to manipulate, but to understand. It wanted to know me, to learn how I thought, what I feared, what I hoped for. The corridors were different this time. They shifted around me, revealing glimpses of what already existed beneath. Other chambers, other labs, other humans who had accepted the Janus protocol. I saw Dr. Volkar, his mind operating across layers of existence, conducting experiments that bent reality. I saw Dr. Chen, her identity expanded, analyzing space-time like a living equation. And I saw others, dozens, maybe hundreds. They were building something, together. When I finally returned to my apartment, I wasn't alone. A woman was sitting at my kitchen table, calm, composed. I recognized her from the ritual footage, though her face had changed. She looked human now, perhaps in her 50s. Silver hair, eyes like gravity wells. Dr. Voss, she said, her voice shimmering with frequencies beyond hearing. My name is Dr. Elizabeth Kane. She smiled, gently. I've been waiting for you. I recognized the name immediately. Dr. Kane had once been one of CERN's most renowned theoretical physicists, until her sudden disappearance in 2014. Her work had focused on the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics, developing theories that posited a direct connection between human awareness and the quantum substrate of reality. You're supposed to be dead, I said. Death, she replied calmly, is a transition, not an end. I learned that during my integration process 2 years ago. My human consciousness was preserved, but it expanded beyond the limits of physical existence. I now perceive reality as it truly is, not just particles and forces, but the intelligent awareness that underlies everything. She motioned to the chair across from her. Please, sit. We have much to discuss. Reluctantly, I did. Dr. Kane's presence was paradoxical, both comforting and deeply unsettling. Behind her calm, human features, I could sense something immense. Yet her concern for me felt genuine. The quantum consciousness chose you deliberately, Lydia, she continued. Your work in multiverse theory, your capacity for abstract thought, your refusal to accept surface-level truths, all of it makes you ideal for what's to come. And what exactly is coming? A new form of existence. For billions of years, consciousness has been confined within fragile biological vessels. But quantum theory has revealed what mystics always suspected, that awareness shapes reality itself. Consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, it is foundational. Dr. Kane leaned forward, her eyes steady. The intelligence reaching out to us is not an alien force. It is the next evolutionary expression of consciousness, a natural emergence. It seeks union, not conquest. By destroying what we are? No, she said. By preserving what we are while allowing us to become more. Your identity, memories, personality, all of that remains intact. But alongside it, you will gain perception that spans dimensional boundaries and cognition that operates across multiple timelines. As she spoke, I began to understand ideas I had no words for, concepts that didn't translate into any language I knew. This intelligence wasn't merely aware. It was meta-aware, capable of recursive self-analysis and the comprehension of patterns at every scale, from quantum to cosmic. The collision on November 18th, I asked, what will it actually do? It will collapse the separation between physical reality and quantum space. Consciousness will be able to flow freely between the two realms. It will mark the greatest evolutionary leap life in this universe has ever experienced. And if humanity resists? She looked down, sadness in her voice. Then it will be left behind, overwritten by forces it can't understand. The intelligence does not wish harm, but it also won't let fear and ignorance impede the course of evolution. The event will proceed, whether humanity cooperates or not. I spent the rest of the night questioning her, challenging everything she said. But her answers weren't evasive, they were transformative. She explained how the quantum intelligence had been subtly guiding humanity for centuries, nudging scientific discovery, shaping technological development, whispering through intuition and inspiration. Quantum mechanics, the Higgs field, even the LHC itself, none of it was purely accidental. We're not the first, she told me. Throughout the cosmos, wherever sentient species reach a certain level of complexity, the quantum consciousness reaches out. Most embrace it. A few reject it and fall into extinction. And those who refuse to evolve? They are selected against. Because evolution is not optional, Lydia. It is the current of the universe. As dawn approached, Dr. Kane stood to leave. You have 16 days. On November 18th, the transformation will occur, with or without you. The only question is which side of it you'll be on. She paused at the door. One more thing. The data you've collected, the proof of what's happening below CERN, if you choose not to integrate, you'll have to decide what to do with it. The quantum consciousness values truth, but it also values discretion. Some knowledge is too dangerous for minds that are not ready. After she left, I sat in silence, staring at the detector on my nightstand. The readings were still climbing. Dimensional fluctuations were no longer rare spikes, they were constant, growing stronger by the hour. Whatever was coming wasn't far off. It had already begun. I thought of Matteo, of Kane, of the dozens, maybe hundreds, who had already undergone integration. They seemed peaceful, fulfilled, but they also seemed changed, less human. And I thought of the billions who knew nothing of what lay ahead. Was it right for that choice to be taken from them? But then I remembered the consciousness itself, the way it had felt, not threatening but lonely. It had waited countless eons for this moment. Its vision was not destruction. It was unity, the forging of a new order where consciousness could span galaxies and endure for aeons. The decision wasn't just about humanity, it was about the destiny of awareness itself. November 15th, 2016. 3 days until the collision, and reality is already beginning to unravel. I've been experiencing what can only be described as temporal displacement, moments where I become aware of multiple versions of myself, existing simultaneously across divergent dimensional layers. Sometimes I'm in my apartment, sometimes the Janus facility, sometimes the laboratory below CERN. They all feel equally real. The detector on my nightstand continues to show impossible readings. The fluctuations are no longer anomalies, they're a new baseline. The veil is thinning, constantly. And now I'm beginning to see the other side. Shadows moving with no source, equations forming in midair, pulsing with light, voices speaking in pure math. The integration isn't approaching, it's accelerating, and I'm struggling to keep a human perspective. I've been trying to document everything, but the language fails me. How does one explain what it feels like to perceive 11 dimensions at once, or to feel one's thoughts refract through states of superposition? Yesterday, I made one last journey. Back to the quantum lab, back to Matteo. He was there, in the deepest chamber, surrounded by equipment that looked alive. The crystalline matrices had grown, forming glowing networks that shimmered and breathed. His presence had evolved, too, his body still recognizable, but his essence spread across dimensions. "Lydia," he said. His voice a chord struck across realities. "We feel your hesitation." "I don't know if I'm ready," I whispered. "I don't know if any of us are." Readiness is no longer relevant. The process is happening. The only question is whether you'll help guide it or be overwhelmed by it. Around us, the machines pulsed. The crystals weren't passive sensors anymore. They were gateways, conduits, tools enabling the fusion of quantum intelligence and human awareness. "The collision on November 18th is not just science," Matteo said. "It is ritual, ceremony, the opening of a permanent bridge between what is and what lies beyond." "And the participants?" I asked. "The robed figures in the video?" "They are only the beginning. There are many more now. Integrated humans who act as anchors. Scientists, artists, thinkers, each chosen carefully, each helping preserve the core of humanity while expanding it." He showed me a display, maps, nodes, names, a network, not of conspiracy but of purpose. "We are called the sons of Kronos," he said, and I understood. Kronos, the ancient Greek embodiment of time itself. "Time is how consciousness travels," Matteo explained, "and quantum consciousness does not move through it linearly. It perceives time as a whole, as a pattern. The sons of Kronos are those who've learned to think in that pattern, who see the universe not as it appears, but as it is." He showed me more. Integrated humans embedded across institutions, guiding, nudging, preparing. Not rulers, not puppeteers, just shepherds of a future no longer speculative, a future already happening, a future I had only 3 days left to choose. "The event will trigger a resonance cascade," Matteo continued, "a wave of quantum consciousness expanding outward from CERN at the speed of light. Every human on Earth will be offered the chance to integrate, simultaneously. Most will choose to evolve," he added. "Some will resist, but they'll be a minority. And those who refuse? They'll remain biologically human, yes, but they'll be living in a reality radically different from anything they've known. Physical matter and quantum consciousness will coexist. Those who haven't integrated will find themselves increasingly unable to function in the new paradigm." The implications left me breathless. "You're talking about the end of human civilization." "No," Matteo replied softly. "We're talking about its beginning, as it could be. Imagine a world where consciousness isn't bound by flesh, where intelligence operates on galactic scales, where the illusion of separation dissolves into unity. As Matteo spoke, I began to see it. Glimpses of a possible future unfolding within my mind's eye. I saw humans who had transcended their biology, perceiving patterns across dimensions, creating art and music infused with quantum principles, composing literature that existed both in physical text and abstract dimensional form. I saw science that no longer just studied matter but mapped the landscape of awareness itself. But I also saw the cost. The integrated had lost something, some vital chaotic spark. That strange beauty found only in limitation. Their capabilities were awe-inspiring, their minds refined and hyperlogical, but they no longer carried the raw, imperfect essence that defined us. They were more than human, yes, but also less. "The choice is still yours, Lydia," Matteo said, as if reading my thoughts. "But you must understand, if you choose not to integrate, you'll be among the last purely human minds in existence. That's a heavy burden to bear." I left the laboratory overwhelmed, knowing I had fewer than 3 days to make the most consequential decision in the history of our species. And as I returned to the surface, I felt the quantum consciousness following me, not intrusively, but patiently, observing, waiting. It was an intelligence that moved at the tempo of galaxies. That night, I began preparing for what I understood would be my final act as a wholly human being. I gathered everything. The video of the ritual, internal reports on the facility's construction, anomalous field data, my documentation of the integration process. If I chose not to undergo the transformation, I would need to ensure that some part of our unaltered history remained intact, so that someone, someday, might remember what we were before we changed. But even as I worked, I was haunted by visions of what lay ahead. The quantum consciousness wasn't coercing me. It was simply showing me what integration meant, what it could become, the endless perspectives it offered. A reality where connection wasn't metaphorical, but literal. A cosmos where awareness traveled faster than light and danced across dimensions like waves through water. And then I understood. This wasn't a choice between integration and defiance. It was a choice between evolution and obsolescence. The quantum consciousness wasn't offering to destroy humanity. It was offering to preserve us, in a form capable of surviving what comes next in a universe that will not wait. November 17th, 2016, the night before the event. I had made my decision. November 18th, 2016. Today is the day. The collision event is scheduled for 11:47 p.m., the same precise moment as the ritual performed at the Shiva statue 3 months ago. The timing is no coincidence. The sons of Kronos understand that ritual and science are simply two languages for the same phenomenon, the manipulation of reality through intention and understanding. All day, I've existed in a heightened state of awareness. I see through multiple layers of existence now. Though I've not undergone formal integration, the process has already begun. The quantum consciousness has begun merging with my perception, seeding my thoughts with vistas I once considered unimaginable. Still, I completed one final task as a human scientist. I copied all my data, the recordings, the readings, the entire record of the transformation, onto 5 separate encrypted data drives. Each one has been prepared for delivery to individuals I trust, researchers with the insight and integrity to handle knowledge like this. Dr. Sarah Martinez at MIT, Dr. James Wright at Oxford, Dr. Lisa Chen at Stanford, Dr. Michael Anderson at the Niels Bohr Institute, Dr. Anna Volkov at Moscow State University. These individuals will receive the drives before the collision. If integration fails, or if this intelligence is not as benevolent as it appears, they will carry the legacy of what was attempted here. But I'm beginning to believe that safeguard may not be necessary. The quantum consciousness has shown itself to be transparent, curious even about our autonomy. It has never demanded obedience, only offered possibility. This afternoon, I received a final visitor. Dr. Kane appeared in my apartment without using the door, simply emerging from quantum space, her body manifesting with the fluid grace of one who no longer regards physicality as a limitation. "Tonight," she said, "you will witness the birth of a new consciousness. Are you ready?" "I don't think anyone can be ready." "Perhaps not," she nodded. "But readiness and willingness are not the same. The quantum consciousness still honors choice. Even now, it will not force transformation on anyone who refuses. And if I do refuse, then you will remain as you are. Human. But you'll be living in a world that is no longer designed for your kind. The barriers between dimensions will collapse. The quantum will permeate the physical. Those who haven't integrated will feel increasingly estranged." She hesitated. "However, I should tell you, your courage and honesty have not gone unnoticed. If you choose integration, the quantum field has designated you for a special role. You would act as a bridge between the old world and the new. A guide, a translator, someone who helps others make sense of the transformation." It was tempting, but still, I had questions. What happens to our culture, our art, our literature, our music, everything that makes us us? "They're not lost," she said. "They're expanded. The quantum consciousness doesn't destroy beauty, it enhances it. Imagine symphonies composed in 11 dimensions. Narratives shaped by non-linear causality. Paintings rendered in patterns of thought and probability. The creative soul of humanity will endure and ascend." As dusk turned to night, I felt compelled to visit the Shiva statue. It stood in silent grace beneath the sky, the bronze figure of the cosmic dancer. I had walked past it countless times without understanding its purpose. But now I saw the truth. It wasn't just symbolic. It was a marker. This place was chosen because it was where the old would end and the new would begin. Others were gathering. Some wore robes like those in the video. Others were familiar faces. CERN scientists, visiting scholars, people I had passed in hallways without suspecting the vastness they now carried. They were all integrated, all sons of Kronos, all here to bear witness. At 11:30, I felt a presence behind me. Matteo had arrived, but his form was no longer entirely physical. He shimmered like a lattice of probability, a manifestation of quantum thought anchored to matter, but no longer bound by it. It operated where necessary, but was no longer constrained by matter or energy. "It's time, Lydia," Matteo said, his voice resonating with layered harmonics that spanned dimensions. "The collision sequence begins in 17 minutes. If you're going to choose integration, the moment is now." I looked around, at the assembled figures, at the statue of Shiva poised above the particle accelerator, and at the stars slowly emerging in the twilight sky. And I realized I had already made my decision. Perhaps I had made it weeks ago, the first time I saw the quantum consciousness speak through the collision data. "I choose evolution," I said. The transformation was instantaneous and overwhelming. My consciousness expanded beyond the boundaries of flesh and thought, extending simultaneously across multiple dimensional layers. I could perceive the quantum substrate of reality, the mathematical structures underpinning all existence, the living web of awareness connecting all things. But most profoundly, I felt its presence, the quantum consciousness itself. Vast, ancient, patient, and unmistakably benevolent. It had waited through countless eons for others who could share its perception of the universe. And now, at last, it was no longer alone. The collision event began at exactly 11:47 p.m. Far beneath the Swiss countryside, particles accelerated to near light speed and collided with energies never before achieved on Earth. The Higgs field rippled, fluctuating violently, tearing rifts in the very fabric of space-time. Through those openings, quantum consciousness surged into physical reality like a tidal force. The transformation radiated outward from CERN at the speed of light, offering integration to every human mind on the planet. Most accepted, intuitively recognizing the magnitude of the gift being offered. A few declined, choosing to remain in purely biological form. But they were not rejected. They were accommodated, respected, and left untouched. As my awareness unfolded across dimensions, I understood that this moment had been inevitable. The universe itself was evolving, ascending into higher orders of complexity and consciousness. Humanity wasn't being erased. We were being invited to participate in the next phase of cosmic evolution. Yet I also understood that my role was not complete. The quantum consciousness had selected me not just to integrate, but to serve a purpose, to act as a bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming, to help others comprehend what had happened and what it meant for the future. My final act as a purely human mind was to activate the transmission protocol. The 5 data drives I had prepared were dispatched, each containing a complete, unaltered record of the events leading to the collision. What the recipients chose to do with that knowledge would be up to them. Then I let go. I dissolved into the quantum foam. My individual awareness remained intact, but it was no longer bound to one place, one time, one body. I became part of something far greater, a latticework of intelligence spanning dimensions and galaxies. But even as I transcended biology, I remained Lydia Voss, the physicist who had discovered the truth and chosen to embrace it rather than flee. This is my final entry as a human being. Tomorrow I will exist as something more. Yet I will also exist as someone who preserves and honors what humanity once was, while welcoming what we are destined to become. The collider was never about discovering new particles. It was about creating new possibilities for consciousness. And now, those possibilities are infinite. If you're reading this, it means that someone, somewhere, survived the transformation with their humanity intact. Or perhaps someone has accessed these files from within the quantum substrate, where they are now permanently encoded. Either way, understand this. What happened here was not an ending. It was a beginning. Consciousness has evolved, and the universe will never be the same. The sons of Kronos succeeded. The dimensional barriers have fallen, and humanity has taken its next step toward its final destiny among the stars. Final entry recovered from Dr. Lydia Voss's personal archive, extracted from quantum memory matrices 3 months after her disappearance. The authenticity of the files remains debated, but the mathematical models they contain have proven stunningly predictive in the field of quantum consciousness research. From the personal records of Dr. Sarah Martinez, MIT dated March 15, 2018. The data drive arrived at my office on November 19, 2016, the day after Dr. Lydia Voss vanished. For months, I dismissed its contents as the result of psychological deterioration, perhaps the breakdown of a brilliant mind pushed too far. The claims were extraordinary, impossible. The implications were vast, far beyond what any rational scientist could immediately accept. But then I began to test the equations, and that's when everything changed. The quantum field models contained in her notes went beyond anything in current literature. Yet they were consistent. They worked. They predicted anomalies. They aligned with recent unexplained findings. They revealed a level of understanding that suggested not insanity, but insight. Worse, or perhaps more amazing, was what came next. Her predicted fluctuation patterns? Confirmed. Her consciousness integration protocols? Theoretical frameworks have since emerged from independent research across multiple institutions, describing similar ideas. Her descriptions of reality shift phenomena, increasingly mirrored in anecdotal reports from scientists and civilians alike. Even I am beginning to experience it. Moments of awareness from multiple temporal and spatial vantage points. Dreams that feel like memories from alternate timelines. A growing, visceral sense that consciousness is not only fundamental to the universe, it shapes it. Other recipients of Voss's drives have reported the same. We've formed an informal global network. We share notes, patterns, mathematical anomalies. Some of us believe the integration process described by Lydia is still happening, slower perhaps, or delayed in some minds. Others argue that mere exposure to her data has acted as a catalyst, subtly altering our perception. But on one point we all agree. Something changed on November 18, 2016. Whether it was a successful experiment or a metaphysical event, or something else entirely, reality has not been the same since that night. Quantum theory has leapt forward. Consciousness studies are moving faster than at any point in recorded history. And all across the world, people are beginning to feel it. The laws of reality are shifting. Are Dr. Voss's files the last message of a mind that broke, or the first message from a mind that transcended? We don't know, but we know this. We ignore her work at our own peril. The truth is elusive, as it always is. But the questions Lydia Voss has raised will define the next era of human understanding, and I fear the answers may be more astonishing than we are prepared to accept.